Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we continue our ongoing spotlight on entrepreneurship here at the Darden School of Business with a conversation with Jake Eichengreen and Nick Farmer, two second-year students in our Full-Time MBA Class of 2023. Jake and Nick recently competed in UVA's Entrepreneurship Cup with a concept called Tuckamore Development Partners. This concept is focused on decarbonizing the built environment and accelerating the adoption of mass timber building materials as a replacement for concrete and steel. This conversation touches on a lot of different things. Jake and Nick talk about their MBA journeys and what led them to Darden, but they also talk a lot about how their venture has grown and evolved during their time here at Darden. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jake Eichengreen and Nick Farmer, two second-year students in our Full-Time MBA Class of 2023. Nick, Jake, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks. It's great to have y'all here. It's an exciting time of year. It's December. Things are winding down. Does it feel like things are winding down for y'all? Nick, how's everything going?
Doing great. It's nice to be nearing the end of the quarter here. And Jake's put together a nice trip for us over the coming weeks, which he can tell you about, but we're pretty pumped.
All right. Well, Jake, in addition to being a Darden student, are you also a travel agent?
No, just like having a good time with people I care about. So this time I took on the work of figuring out what our winter break trip was going to be. So there's 5 of us Darden students, and a few of our partners are going down to South America, and we're going to trek the O circuit in Patagonia, which is 8 days on the trail. Then we're going to stop in Ecuador on the way back for like another 40 miles. So, we're going to spend our break walking, which I know some people might think is not that much fun, but I think all of us are pretty stoked about it.
Do you need any podcast coverage on this Patagonia venture?
Yes.
There's always space. Yeah, you're welcome to join. We'd love to have you.
I like the idea that who's that person trailing behind you with a microphone? That's the podcast host. I like that. Well, thank y'all both for doing this. It's exciting to have you on here. Past seasons, we've had student teams that participated in the E-Cup and on the podcast to talk about their ventures, to talk about that experience. These conversations are always fun. Before we get to that point of talking about your idea and your venture, I want to set the stage a little bit and talk a little bit more about you. So, Jake, tell us who are you? What did you do before coming to Darden?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jake Eichengreen. I'm actually originally from Southern Colorado. I did my undergrad at Wesleyan out in Connecticut, kind of a classic liberal arts degree. And then my whole career coming up to when I started at Darden was in the entrepreneurship space. I started a small company in Uganda. I started a second company back home in Colorado, which I ran for a few years. But really for me, I felt like neither of the companies I built were exactly what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life. They were very interesting, very rewarding, but I wanted to find a way to do work that was a little bit more national in scale and much more meaningfully connected to solving climate change. And what drew me to Darden was really the academic experience. I loved my undergrad in that I got to really kind of dig deep in the classroom. And it was Darden's reputation for academics, the relationship with the faculty, and then also the location in Charlottesville, because I love being outside, that really sealed the deal for me.
All right. Nick, how about you? Tell us more about you and your background.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having us again. Nick Farmer. I'm from Medfield, Massachusetts, originally New England area. 6 years worked at the U.S. Agency for International Development and Humanitarian Assistance out of D.C., so responding to international disaster crises abroad. My main bailiwick was really doing private sector engagement, so working with companies to understand that there's value working in the disaster risk reduction and response phase so that they can get back up and operational after a disaster goes through their area. And unfortunately, that's becoming more and more frequent as the result of climate change. So got to the point where I was having conversations with the companies and we were talking to a lot of their corporate social responsibility folks, but I wanted to be able to have those long-term partnership conversations that impact the bottom line, and realized I couldn't do that without an MBA. So threw my hat in. And Brett, you actually were the one that called me to offer me admission to Darden a couple of years ago. So thanks for that.
Well, we always say it. That is the best part of the job, when you get to call people and say, guess what? I've got great news. You've been admitted to Darden. That never gets old. It's fantastic. Well, thrilled to have you here on the show. And one of the questions I always like to start with, because I think it's good for prospective students to hear, did you always know that you wanted to pursue an MBA? So Nick, you mentioned you got to a point where, okay, MBA is probably the next thing for me. Was that an old idea? Was that a new idea? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. I spent my undergrad studying Russian studies and international relations. I found I wanted to stay in the public sector, but eventually got to the point where I realized that companies can have a lot of the impacts that I wanted to see the government doing. And oftentimes they're there for a longer period of time, have more skin in the game, so to speak, in some of the markets that they operate in. So started kind of poking around. I was looking at masters in econ programs, international affairs as well, and then started toying around with the idea of an MBA. Talked to anybody who would listen to me at Darden pretty much, and it just all the things that I wanted to get out of a program, it all started clicking, and especially with the rigor of the academic program here, is something I wanted to get up to speed given my background is in the social sciences, and definitely have gotten that so far. So wasn't always part of the plan, but ended up being a pretty key piece.
How about you, Jake? MBA, something you always thought about?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Nick. I actually decided to pursue my MBA, a year before actually coming to Darden, like the same cycle that I submitted my applications in. I always kind of thought I would go to law school if I was going to pursue graduate school. Similar to Nick, I also did the liberal arts background, and sort of always thought that I would move in the direction of law or the public space, public sector work somehow. Accidentally became an entrepreneur. Enjoyed that. And then as I was kind of thinking about next steps in my life and reflecting on the work that I really like to do, I had already actually taken the LSAT twice. And I was just reflecting on it and realizing that I really enjoy the work of taking a bunch of data and having to figure out what to do with it and making decisions in ambiguity and basically thinking about, how do you solve problems? How do you move forward? How do you move an organization forward? How do you lead a team forward? And the more I thought about it, the more feedback I was getting that this is not necessarily a legal education that you want. You want to stay in business, Jacob, and keep moving. So, so that kind of inspired the pivot to an MBA, and I'm really happy I did it.
How do you become an accidental entrepreneur?
It's a good question. I spent a lot of my undergrad conducting economic research in Uganda on microfinance loans. And the research sort of led me to an idea about a company like a company structure that could do microfinance in a way that I felt would be better for communities. Microfinance loans are remarkable at spurring economic growth, but without getting into the weeds of the research, there were just some social impacts that weren't stellar. And I came up with this concept. A friend of mine did a fellowship after he graduated from Wesleyan in entrepreneurship. He recommended that I look into it. And I just sort of, kind of followed that. And so sort of on accident, I ended up actually having the opportunity to build that company or at least to start the company that I wrote about in my research. And it didn't end up being successful, but it was one of those things where it sort of gave me a taste of that field and a taste of business.
Well, you both have mentioned the Darden academic experience as something that led you to Darden. And I also, as I was listening to your stories, you both sound like people who really enjoy school. At least that's the impression that I got from the way you talked about the things that you did before coming to Darden. So Jake, what was it about the Darden academic experience that resonated with you?
Yeah, Brett, I think you picked up on it. I am a huge nerd. No, I think more than anything, it was the faculty relationships. And I think I had a sense of what they were going to be like, or, how special they were through the conversations I had with Darden students, or just kind of listening to this podcast, or engaging on various different admissions events. But then when I got in the classroom, there are just so many moments where it actually felt like a professor who has taught this class however many times has an individual relationship with me, one of 70 in the section, and is tailoring the moment that he or she calls on me in class to match my growth. And it was those types of things where, there's a lot of space in the Darden academic experience to experiment, to grow, to try things. And then there are professors who are incredibly tuned in. They're not over present. They're not trying to over architect the experience. But for me, it's really been one of, they do very intentionally create these moments and these interactions and these relationships that then complement the experimentation I get to do, the intellectual experimentation I get to do myself. I don't know. It's been really special for me. I don't even know if these words I've just said capture it. It's just really been, it lands in that world of how great the faculty are.
How about for you, Nick? What about the academic experience appealed to you?
Yeah, so my whole MO going into an MBA program coming from the public sector, wanted to get really engaged with the core curriculum, really get those intimate relationships with my colleagues and the faculty. And Darden was really the only program that I was looking at that could touch all those points from the folks that I talked to in the outreach phase, and even when I got here. So I think when you're in the midst of the core, you're wondering how much you're kind of retaining, and then you get out into your internship, and if you choose to do an entrepreneurial endeavor like Jake and I are doing, and you're like, oh my, I can do quite a bit of things that I couldn't do before coming here. So it's worth its weight in gold for sure so far.
I appreciate your mentioning that summer between first year and second year. One of the things that's been mentioned here on the podcast is that internship or the experience that students have during that summer. It's a time where maybe a lot of things click into place. People are like, I get it now, and I can do all this stuff, and I'm getting asked all these questions, and I feel comfortable answering them, and it becomes very validating. And maybe when you're in quarter one or quarter two of your first year, you don't have that picture yet, but it's coming. So, well, talk to us a little bit about your first year experience. So Nick, you come to Darden, you mentioned having this background, a little bit more liberal arts, and here you are, you're an MBA student. What was your first year like?
Yeah, so you hit the ground running. In August, you start class, you do the core curriculum for 3 quarters. I came to school with my partner, and we found a nice place near grounds to put our dog and hang out. But it's pretty intense, honestly. You're doing class for 8 to 2 o'clock every day and you're doing learning team in the evening. But it really enables, between that and the makeup of the program being in sections, it really enables you to get very close to the folks in your cohort. We have really small class sizes, so you get to know everybody at the school and develop intimate relationships with them, learn about their backgrounds, what they're recruiting for. And it kind of multiplies and accelerates your understanding of what the opportunities are coming out of these programs, along with the shared understanding of the issues we're discussing in the case method, learning from your peers, very strong emphasis in the core. So it's a really fantastic way to learn. It's unlike anything that I have done in the past, but I found that it was super valuable for me.
What section were you?
Section D Dragons.
All right. What was your favorite thing about being in Section D?
I'd say we just had such a close knit community, and we just all hung out together, and you get to know the professors really well, and how everybody's going to respond to certain questions, and who's the finance person, and everything else in the classroom. So just coming together real closely is kind of a hallmark of the program there.
All right, Jake. So you came to Darden. You were excited about the academic experience, this idea where you can sort of explore and learn more, get to know these incredible faculty. What was your first year like?
Similar to Nick. I mean, my first year was defined by my peers, I think, more so than anything. Like, obviously, the academics were what I came here for, and they delivered. But I had a similar experience of just bonding with my section so quickly, feeling like they were my peers, like they were very diverse, like I had the opportunity to get to know them very quickly and very deeply. And it didn't take long for, inside jokes to pop up in section. And so somebody would say a comment and the whole class would giggle and the professor would be very confused because we all knew that person was, of course, going to say that. Or, somebody would bet somebody else to mention, something from a TV show or a song in their comments in class. It became very playful, and just this very tight community within the classroom, within the section. We'd socialize together. We'd hang out after class. I think my first year more than anything just had this rich community of people that I just enjoyed being with, and still do, where we're all still friends.
It's interesting that you mentioned that sort of playfulness, or that people are actually enjoying the experience, because I think sometimes when people talk about MBA programs, you start hearing about all the work, et cetera, et cetera. But every time I'm around a section or see the students engaging with each other, they actually seem to be really having a good time, like laughing. They obviously have their in jokes. You have your own sort of culture that operates within that section. I guess that's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, we have a cheer in Section C. I was Section C, the cool, calm, collected, cheerful, charismatic. I could keep going. Champions, of course. And we have our own cheer that involves a lot of shouting. It's very much of so a tight community. And I don't know, even the moments where we're sort of in pseudo competition with each other through some exercise or simulation, like we're always still having a good time. Like at the end of first quarter, at the end of core, we do a marketing simulation for the whole first year class called StratSim, and you're competing with other teams in your section. And I remember, and you don't know who's on which team. You're just kind of competing through a digital interface for the first couple of days of it. On the third day, you start to figure out who's on which team. And I remember that my friend Jim was in the learning team room next to me. And it turns out his team kept producing these, you're simulating being car companies, and his team kept producing cars, and then my team would totally clobber them with our simulated cars. And we actually made him a bracelet with the name of one of our cars. It was just one of those things where like it was an intense, all day 8 to 5 is simulation for 3 or 4 days in a row, and we just laughed our way through it and had a great time and learned at the same time. So it was a blast. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate your sharing that. It's the first time StratSim has come up here on the podcast, but it's good for people to hear about it. And our executive MBA students did it during their second leadership residency from the class of 2022. They also seem to really enjoy it. And so I appreciate your mentioning it here, Jake.
They had the TV screens with how each team was doing when the execs were doing it, and the full-time students kept stopping by to see how everybody was doing. So it's a shared joy.
Well, let's talk about how your summers went. Nick, how did you spend your summer?
Yeah, so I spent my summer at a FMCG company, and I was working on circular packaging. Basically, it scratched the itch of looking at a sustainability component of a major multinational corporation, and really analyzing how people view sustainability within companies. And the big takeaway that I had from that was people are super amped about trying to find sustainable solutions to some of the big problems that they're facing in their respective channels. And companies are still figuring it out, right? There's not any one answer to anything. I think one of the assumptions that I had coming in was, you can have a playbook for FMCG, you can have a playbook for consumer packaged goods, but it's just needs to be so tailored to every specific environment that no one person can actually accomplish the sustainability goals. So the MBA kind of enables you to be a Swiss Army knife, so to speak. And you know a little bit about operations. I was working on circular packaging, so I could call up my operations professor and ask them, hey, I've got this continuous loop problem that I'm dealing with. And they're like, oh, go read this and that academic article, and you can probably apply some of the models to the issue you're facing. And it was just a great experience overall. You got really, really high level exposure to some of the executives in the company, and they're giving you some really hard challenges to work on over the summer that Darden definitely equips you to deal with. So it was a great learning experience for sure. I enjoyed it.
All right, I have a few follow-up questions. What's FMCG?
Yeah, great questions. Fast moving consumer goods. It was in the food and beverage industry.
All right. And what's circular packaging?
Circular packaging. So this company in particular, their whole bread and butter is bottles. They're a beer company. So they would issue bottles out into the market and expect them to return. They actually view them as capital expenditures for the company. It's their property. So the issue set was really, how do you predict when they're going to come back more so that you can go to your bottle manufacturers and put in the appropriate deliveries? They were spending a lot of money on that system. So trying to figure out if there's operational efficiencies that could be created in there, and if you could quantify the sustainable benefits for having that circular packaging system.
Wow, super interesting. Probably also very complex to try to wrap your head around something like that.
Yeah, it was fun to noodle with it.
Did you know that you wanted to do something operational, or was it the sustainability piece that really attracted you to that?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I would say I was lucky to get the sustainability component. I was pretty and pretty motivated. You'll see in our venture here about logistics, operations, supply chain. It's a huge part of the humanitarian ecosystem, is trying to figure out how to get life-saving goods to people affected by disasters when roads are blown out and planes are flying all over the place with relief commodities. So there was an interesting parallel to my past life there, and the fact that it was a sustainably focused project was the icing on the cake for me.
All right. Well, Jake, same question for you. How did you spend your summer between your first and second year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I spent my summer working for DuPont in their building materials division in Delaware, in sort of a strategy role, also with a pretty heavy sustainability component, thinking about kind of what's 3 to 5 years in the future for them. So I did some work that was related to some of their products and how to make them more climate friendly. I had one project that also touched on circularity, like Nick's mentioning. This wasn't. It's a little bit more hands off in that environment where a material is put into a building, and then how does it ultimately get recycled at the end of life of that building, and then ultimately end back up in the supply chain for the next generation of the same type of building product. I actually had a heck of a time trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my summer because coming to school with an entrepreneurial background, I struggled with the decision of like, do I want to pick an industry, or do I want to pick a role, or do I want to pick some other facet of it? And DuPont was a great place to spend my summer because it really allowed me to experience something completely new. I'd never worked in a big company before. Obviously, they're a large firm. I knew I wanted to do something sustainability related, and kind of heavy industry is a space in sustainability that maybe doesn't come to mind right away. And so it sort of allowed me to kind of dive into a place where there is a ton of stuff going on related to sustainability. And it's a whole different set of problems to solve, of how do you make something cleaner and more recyclable and all of that type of stuff. It's not just, clean energy, which is very fascinating and interesting. This was just a richer place for me personally to learn and figure out if that's what I wanted to do.
All right. Well, it's always great to hear about how people spent their summers. And we always try to acknowledge here on the podcast, I think it's important for people to know this is all part of the exploration process for people, right? I think there's sometimes when people are prospective students, you feel like, oh gosh, I got to figure out everything in the first year, that internship, et cetera. No, it's part of the process. If you might go and do something you really enjoyed, and great. Or you might go and do it, and that's just more feedback for you to come into your second year, sort of thinking about what you want to do after graduation. And so let's talk about your second year. How are things going, Jake? How's your second year so far?
Second year has been good. Similar to first year, we hit the ground running. And I think one of the things that has really defined the year for me is I knew that Darden was student run when I came to Darden, and that there's so many initiatives and events and things that are put on. But I didn't fully appreciate that if something is student run, that means the students do everything for it. And it's awesome. And so, for example, both Nick and I are on the board of the General Management Club at Darden, and we do a bunch of events. And so that sort of required a bunch of work and was a really great experience for me at the beginning of the year. And then classes hit the ground running, and everybody's back for their internships. And if you choose to re-recruit, that's happening. So I don't know, it's sort of been a whirlwind. It's crazy for me that today was the last day of classes for the whole fall semester.
Well, Nick, how about you? Has it been a busy year for you? I take it since, at least it sounds like you're busy with the General Management Club amongst other things. So how's your second year?
Yeah, for sure. Busy, but fun. I would bold, underline, italicize, emphasize the resources that this school has have really become incredibly apparent in my second year. Everywhere from the Batten Center to staff, to the network, to just talking to peers. I've really pivoted to exploring the real estate development spaces we'll talk about here as well with this venture. And the community has just opened their arms wholeheartedly and helped us get there. So case in point, we've been a part of a venture velocity class with one of our professors, Damon DeVito, and he basically has helped us take this idea from a nascent stage. This is an interesting space. There seems like there's a market efficiency here, all the way to a viable business product now. So between that and the connections that we've been able to kind of run this by to the community, it's again just been very apparent how beneficial the program is from a learning development standpoint.
Well, that does open the door to talk about sort of the next phase of our conversation, which is your venture. But before we do that, I think this is the first mention of the General Management Club here on the podcast, and I want to talk just a little bit more about what it is. Jake, you introduced the General Management Club here as part of your mention of your second year and how things are going. Tell us a little bit more about what the club is and what it does.
Yeah, so I'm the president of the board and Nick's our VP of finance and corporate engagement. And the club is really, I guess I'd call it an umbrella for the community of first years and second years who are recruiting into general management careers. And, the next question that always leads to is, what is general management? And there's no great answer to that question. General management is really an umbrella of career opportunities that exists in just about every company at some level. It's about, can you actually manage a business unit, manage a team to achieve a business objective? So the role that Nick had last summer counts as a general management role in many regards. The role I had, even though it was very different, counts as a general management role. Some other big names of employers at Darden who often, kind of recruit in this space. You have DuPont, you have Invista, Danaher, even some companies like a relatively new company called Team Shares that is a private equity fund that purchases small businesses, hires recent MBAs to be CEOs of those businesses and kind of to grow them. You get a CEO role right out of school. All of that is general management. And the biggest challenge for students as far as, we've sort of identified is the experience can be very isolating because each of these companies is only hiring, 1, 2, maybe 5 students at most from Darden. And you can contrast that with the finance or consulting roles where you have 30 or 40 students going to some of these firms. Everybody kind of has the same process to go through. So where some of the other career clubs at Darden get to offer very tactical resources of this is how you do a case interview or this is how you network in a very specific format. General management is much more around building relationships between people who are engaged in this very individual process, so that it doesn't feel so isolating, so that you have people to talk with, you can share your experiences, commiserate, offer tips. So we do everything from just sort of hosting a big industry conference at the beginning of the year, kind of introducing students to the types of things general managers work on, to some behavioral interview stuff. We actually just had a storyteller from New York City. He's a longtime host at the Moth and kind of a world-renowned storyteller, come in and do some interview prep stuff for folks in this space. So it's sort of a little bit of everything, but it's a very rewarding career club to be involved with because there are so many people kind of doing so many different cool things within it.
I love the Moth. That's so interesting. That's great. Nick, anything you'd want to add about the General Management Club?
Yeah, I mean, Jake is our fearless leader. He touched all the good points. It's a really helpful club, as Jake alluded to, being on the receiving side first year, trying to triangulate what all the different options are out there. As Jake said it, once you get outside kind of the main recruiting paths of investment banking and consulting, it starts to become a bit of the Wild West. And between the Career Center and the GMO Club, it's a really strong source to make sure your stories are up in line, to make sure that your resume is up in line, and that you're targeting and not missing any opportunities that are coming through. So speak very highly of both the Career Center and the GMO Club for that reason.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging the digression. It's just not, like I said, it's a novel opportunity. I can't let it pass. I know there's a listener who's like, wait, what? Jake said something about the General Management Club. Can you ask him more about that? So, dear listener, that was for you. So let's talk about your venture, though. I mentioned Damon DeVito's name comes up a bunch. Venture Velocity comes up a bunch here on the podcast when we talk with student founders, students who are seeking to launch a venture exploring entrepreneurial opportunity. And so Tuckamore Development Partners, this is your venture. You recently competed in the E-Cup, the Entrepreneurship Cup, here at UVA. This is a UVA-wide competition. There's three phases of it. So Nick, tell us a little bit more about what Tuckamore Development Partners is.
Yeah, so kind of the genesis of this idea was both Jake and I are very excited about trying to solve some of the climate challenges that the world is facing. So we started kind of poking around during our first year of what are some of the major polluting industries, and can we leverage our backgrounds in our MBA to attack some of those problems. And what we really started drawing on was the built environment. It constitutes 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. 11% of that is due to concrete and steel. So we started trying to find, okay, are there alternatives to concrete and steel? Are there efficiencies within concrete and steel that can be realized to help reduce that number? We came across this product called mass timber, and mass timber it's really a series of engineered wood products that ranges from floor panels to columns that you would see in buildings. It's but basically a bunch of 2x6s stacked on top of each other, glued, pressed. It's as strong as concrete and steel. It's fire resistant. And most importantly, it constitutes 60% greenhouse gas savings against those figures. And through current US building codes, IBC 21, you can build up to 18 stories, and more municipalities are adopting this across the United States. And we started double clicking on it and started going out, talking to manufacturers, talking to developers, engineers, architects who have used and who have not used this material. And we realized that the market needs a bit of push in the right direction from an operational efficiency standpoint. So what Tuckamore is going to do, we're standing up fabrication and design facilities that are really close to markets. And they're going to sell, buy, cut, and ship these panels and beams really quickly to work sites. Construction companies really index very hard on time, on site, on high quality delivery of their materials. So that's kind of our value proposition there. We're probably going to start this up in the Northeast. There's a deficit of suppliers in that area, and in conversations with manufacturers and conversations with developers, everyone's looking to get involved in this space. And coming down the pipeline are increased regulations on industries across the board, specifically publicly listed companies. And so those developers on that side of the dice are really getting pressured, especially from their European investors, to start actualizing on some of the carbon saving claims that they have in their portfolios and in their new start for buildings. So every rock we overturn, we see a new challenge. Every conversation we have, we see a new opportunity. Folks are super excited about partnering with us, and we've gone from the ideation phase all the way through the effectuation phase, which we could talk about, and now have an actual business plan together and are ready to start going out and having investor conversations. So it's been a great accelerator time for us, and the Darden community has been pretty instrumental in getting our ship in order, so to speak. Jake, did I miss anything? I'm sure I did.
No, I think that was a great overview. I mean, I could definitely speak more to process and the things we've learned, but the fun part and interesting part, I think, in the business school and entrepreneurial space for trying to build a venture like this is, I think a lot of times there's an assumption that new ventures are tech startups or apps, or maybe an apparel line. And what we're trying to build is not. We're trying to replace concrete and steel with wood because it's fundamentally better for the climate. And it has been awesome to just engage with people, whether it be the folks in Damon's class and all the other ventures. And there's a tremendous diversity of ventures there. And there's this wonderful community of supporting each other, but also just across grounds, talking with professors, using it for class projects, and seeing our friends kind of dig in and get excited and for us, it's really valuable to have their brains, and for them, I think it is sort of starting to expand the horizons of what types of companies can you start, and that is also kind of fun.
So, Nick, you'd mentioned kind of gone through these phases with this particular idea. Where do things stand right now? Where are you on your entrepreneurial journey with Tuckamore Development Partners?
Yeah, so we mentioned Venture Velocity with Damon, and we just wrapped that up with a pitch night down at the Code Building in Charlottesville. It's a center for entrepreneurship down here. And effectively, we have our Deccan model. We've got nascent partnership conversations in the mix. We have our site selection finalized, and it's effectively up to Jake and us to continue pushing the envelope here. The venture velocity class was pretty helpful in having us accelerate our assumptions about what we were claiming on the project itself, and so really getting investor ready, I would say. So Damon in particular, he's very literate in this space, very experienced in this space, and challenged us to hit specific milestones every other week and make sure that we kept the ball moving and the momentum going. And Jake and I are now in a place where we're confident in the business model and the integrity of it, and are excited to start reaching out to have some more meaningful conversations with partners.
It's interesting to me, having heard Damon talk with some student founders before, how he is pushing them and like asking, sort of functioning as like an accountability partner. And where are you with this? Okay, what about this? Have you thought about this? Just kind of continuing to sort of help push things forward. And man, it must be really, really nice to have access to somebody with his level of experience, who has so many connections, who can also be there to sort of help you think through, all right, what's the next thing and the next thing. Jake, has it been great?
Yeah, in my life before Darden, I was in the orbit of a couple higher ed institutions that had a similar position to the role that Damon plays for Darden students. And I don't want to speak badly of them, but like I did not have a great impression, because oftentimes, the advice was very surface level, or it was sort of a fly in, fly out type role. It didn't feel, it felt like sort of a check the box. We have this resource available for students, and then, not that much more thought was given to it. But working for Damon has been transformational, because he just, really what it is he listens. And it blows me away every time we interact with him, because he listens and he starts responding and having a conversation, pushing you in a direction. And if he's pushing you in a direction that you're like not really trying to go, he will listen when you say that, and then go the other direction, and then open his Rolodex and make authentic connections and call you on your stuff. If something doesn't feel solid to him, he'll call you on it. And I'm just giving a love letter to Damon at this point, but he's sort of, he really is very supportive of students where they're at. So Nick and I approached this from at least where we started at the beginning of the semester, is this feasible? And he pushed us to really answer that question. There are other students in the class who wanted to build a side project because they had a job they were really excited about, and he supported them there. And there's another student in the class who's already raised in the 7 figures and is building an actual venture and trying to scale, and he supported that founder in that position too. So I just can't say enough about how much value there was for me and for Nick in working with him, because it really came across he was authentically invested in us, not as some vision for us that we didn't have for ourselves.
That's fantastic to hear, and not surprising given what we've heard from other student founders here. It's interesting your point about the feasibility, because when we talked with Elizabeth Blankenship about her idea, just taking this is for our listeners who aren't as familiar with some of these episodes, this is a recent graduate who has this idea about taking fabrics that are luxury fabrics that haven't been used and repurposing them to create as fashionable, clothing, this kind of thing. And Damon's advice to her, at least as she tells the story, was like, well, what's the hardest thing? What's the thing that makes you the most nervous? And her thing was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to even get access to these fabrics, essentially, is what she shared when she's telling her story on the podcast. He said, well, go do that thing. Go figure it out. I wonder, Nick, did he give y'all similar advice as you're trying to figure out feasibility? Can we do this? What did he tell you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The answer is yes. I'm just trying to think. There's been so many of those points where it's been like, just go do it. that I'm having trouble pinning down a specific point. But I would say that from when we got the call in the summer that he was going to invite us to the class, to that point, it had been more of an academic exercise and something of interest to see like, hey, is this feasible, as Jake said? And to have somebody like Damon reach out and say, I have confidence that there is a market here. He's got some development experience as well, and understands the real estate space. It just kind of lights a spark under you, and you're like, all right, somebody who knows what they're talking about believes in me. And just having that level of confidence going into this semester, it just catapults you into success. You envision success. That's something I used to play sports, and that's something our coaches always used to say. It's like, imagine yourself making the goal and you'll probably make it. It's the same thing that Damon puts it out in front of us, and he kind of like keeps moving the needle a little bit, like dangling the carrot out. And it's like, oh, but have you done this thing yet? It's like, oh, that's a good question, Damon. No, we haven't. Just go and chase that other thing. But yeah, it's been a great experience in that regard, and definitely challenged us to put together a viable product in something that it's a very nascent market. It's a very nascent space, and there's a great community out there that's been very supportive of us, and we're collectively attacking some of the challenges in the market to increase adoption. And Damon's been able to help push us to make sure that we're keeping our eye on the prize.
At one point, we sat down with him and we asked something along the lines of like, it's been very easy to have these conversations with people who are running, multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar businesses who are sort of interested in this product. Very easy to talk to them as students. And now that we're increasingly confident that there's there, how do we start talking to them and asking them for money and talking to them as potential business partners? And Damon was like, well, what are you scared of? And we said, well, we don't know, what they're going to, how they're going to respond to the fact that, when we graduate, we don't have large assets to lean on. And, at some point we need to pay rent. We don't know how much equity they're going to want. We don't know how much of a sales pipeline they want to see, locked in. We had this laundry list of things that we didn't know that all seemed very scary. And it's like, okay, we'll write a term sheet and bring it to me. And it became more of an intellectual exercise than it did something we're actually going to use in these partnership conversations moving forward. But it really allowed us to structure our thinking, to put these fears down on paper, to think them through. There isn't one set of answers to them. It's, it all depends on the other. But it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, well, like, put the thing out in the world that ultimately these conversations will result in a term sheet, an agreement to actually partner together, articulate what the different pieces are that you're worried about, and then start playing with them. Play with different combinations and see how you feel. And you'll get to the point where you feel confident actually bringing that into a conversation and presenting yourself as confident because you actually have that confidence.
So Nick, how was the E-Cup helpful to y'all as you're at a certain place with Tuckamore Development Partners? How was the E-Cup useful along this journey?
Yeah, Jake, feel free to jump in here too. I would say for me, it came at a perfect point where we had so many calls and we had so many theories of where to bring things that it forced us to put down on paper what's this look like? And what are the returns going to be in 6 years? And who are the partners? Who are the major stakeholders? Where is the market? And it was kind of this moment that's definitely going to stand out in my mind moving forward of, wow, we know a lot about this space and we've kind of identified what the solution is already. We're good to go. On top of that, they do a good job of bringing in folks that have experience in the spaces that you're looking into to help kind of coach you up and also be on the panel of judges. So having their feedback and learning from some of the questions that they asked after we gave our initial pitch was also super helpful. Somebody had stood up a manufacturing facility right after Darden to make Lumi juice. And she was asking some really good questions that we had some answers to, but also sparked additional ideas to keep moving. So again, like a milestone check-in, a good place to do a comprehensive review, and an opportunity to move forward. And also we were lucky enough to get a little change in the process to keep the fires burning.
Yeah, there are cash prizes for winning teams. It's worth noting that. So Jake, what comes next for your venture? What are y'all looking forward to here?
Well, next comes finals. And then, no, after that, I mean, I think really what we've put down and come up with is a project in New England, the first facility that we want to build. And we have a sense of how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to return, who we need to be involved to make that happen. And so it's a series of conversations to just advance that. There is definitely a world where it doesn't work. I mean, we know that, right? We need a lot of help to pull this out of the ground, and everyone who could help us is going to be looking for a certain something in return. And, we need to do that work together with them to figure out, is this going to work for everybody? But really the next step is starting to have those conversations that I was just saying, Damon was helping us prep for, to sit down with folks that we've now connected with that are now open to the conversation and really lay it out and say, okay, this is what we want to build. This is how big of a facility. These are the machines. This is who we want to partner with to, get contracts to actually cut some of this wood, and work it through with them and see if we're offering them something that is as valuable to them as they would be to us, as a financial backer or infrastructure backer or supplier.
All right. So an exciting time, lots to look forward to. Well, last question. We ask all our guests here on the podcast for a word of advice, something that you would encourage our prospective student listeners to keep in mind as they continue forth on their MBA journey. Jake, I'll start with you, and Nick, I'll come to you next.
Brett, I don't know if I'm going to get away with this, but I think my advice is write an excellent essay about what you want to be when you graduate from Darden. Hit submit and forget it, because truly the opportunity to explore here at Darden has been life-changing for me personally, and being able to dabble in finance classes and then explore what a finance internship would look like, and then to do an internship in heavy industry. I'm not going to be returning to that industry. I had a great experience, but it wasn't a fit for me. I can't say enough good things about them. And I just would hope that every student who comes to Darden leans into the same opportunity to explore and to challenge themselves. And whatever you write in your essay is not, nobody's going to hold you accountable to that. And so being able to really kind of prove that we all have thoughts and hypotheses about what we want to be when we grow up, but now we have the opportunity to test them in ways that I don't know. It's life changing when you actually do that experimentation.
Yeah, we added a subtle few words. I don't know if people really appreciate at least how big of a deal we thought this was as an admissions committee, but we added just an introductory clause. At this time, what are you thinking for your career goals? And that's to signal to people that maybe it's sort of implicit in that, hopefully, what people understand is that this will continue to evolve. Maybe as you advance towards the start of school, post-matriculation. What we always try to tell people as an admissions committee, when you get to that particular essay, is we don't expect you to know sort of at the very granular level exactly what you want to do, but we're looking to see that you've thought about this, that you've reflected on it, that there's this kind of, there's a logic behind what you're putting together here. That those are the kinds of things that we're listening for. But we also readily acknowledge that this is about exploration, it's about transformation. All of this will likely continue to evolve even as you get into the program. And so I appreciate you're saying that, Jake. So Nick, you get the last word here. Piece of advice for our listeners.
Sure. Something I did when I was applying that I'm glad I did. I reached out to a lot of current students and alumni to kind of understand what their experiences are, and what the opportunities are after school. And that now allowed me to really write down on papers, all right, where do I want things to go directionally? It wasn't necessarily as specific as I want to do X, Y, and Z, but it was, I very much value sustainability. I very much want to live a comfortable life and the rest of my life, take care of my parents, etc. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but I do still reference those points sometimes and do a gut check of where was I guess 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and where am I now? And it's very easy to get caught up in the rankings, or when you're talking to your friends, or when you're in school itself and everyone's recruiting consulting and banking, but you thought you wanted to do something else. But being able to go back to that initial, when I was a kid, I want to do this. Like when I grow up, I want to do this statement. It enables you to kind of ground yourself as you move forward, because there's a lot going on in being able to have that truth to yourself and self-reflection, I think is really important, especially as you're making the decision to go to the MBA program.
Oh, I really appreciate that point as well, Nick, because I think what we find prospective students struggle with is like there's 1,000 opinions about what you should do, where you should go, what school, that school, this ranking, all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, like it comes down to what's important to you. And that's something to hold on to as you get into the MBA program, because there's so much opportunity. There's so many things going on. And like, how do you figure out what you want to do? Well, it's all about what's important to you. And you can get caught kind of following the crowd, all this kind of stuff that we talked with people here on the podcast about. And one of the things I think that's a real challenge for first year students in particular, as you're trying to navigate being in an MBA program. This is all new. No one really quite knows, but you're all sort of like trying to figure it out together and keeping in touch with those first principles, doing that self-reflection, that important work, understanding your values, what's meaningful to you. That will help with that prioritization and charting that path. So appreciate y'all coming here on the podcast, sharing your story. Good luck to Tuckamore Development Partners. We look forward, maybe we'll have you back on the podcast to hear how things are going. A New England manufacturing facility, perhaps, in the future.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett, for inviting us. It was great. And thanks, Nate, in the background there. It's nice meeting you guys and talking to you.
Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you, Brett. It's been great.
And that was my interview with Jake Eichengreen and Nick Farmer, 2 second-year students in our full-time MBA class of 2023. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.